if you can't, I guess, if you can't hear me, please just send a note through the chat function or the question function on GoToWebinar. Otherwise, I'd like to welcome you to the Urban and Regional Policy Programs webinar on tackling the challenge of plan implementation. And we have a great presentation today from the City of Flint. So I just wanted to quickly introduce the City of Flint and this topic, and then I'll turn over the webinar to our presenters. So just briefly, the City of Flint has been very engaged in our Dialogues for Change initiative. The website is on your screen right now. So if you'd like more information, please visit there. But just briefly, the Dialogues for Change was designed to engage US and German leaders in a discussion about how to strengthen civic engagement approaches and test new ideas in their communities. So this was a 3-year initiative that included 6 cities, 3 from the US and 3 from Germany, and they met 6 times over the course of 3 years. And they really worked on this issue of moving engagement from a plan or project-specific activity to a much broader conversation around a more sustained concept in their communities. So when the initiative started, we really honed in on engagement in a specific activity. But as we moved through the process, we really focus on broadening this concept to a bigger conversation throughout the community. So the City of Flint has really taken this, the momentum that they developed during their planning process and really turned it into an innovative plan implementation model. So just a couple things before I turn over the webinar to our presenters. If you have any questions, please send them through the question function in GoToWebinar. These can be technical questions, or if you have questions for the presenters, please feel free to send them as well. And we are recording this webinar, so if there are folks who were unable to attend, but who are interested in listening, we will have this available on our website. So I'm going to turn over the webinar to our presenters from the City of Flint. Kevin Schronce, who's a planner with the City of Flint and the task group convener and master plan implementation coordinator, will be leading the webinar. And joining him are Rob Cojeen, resident of Flint and coordinator of the Transportation and Mobility Implementation Task Group, as well as Ali Harris, who is also a resident of Flint and with the Crim Fitness Foundation and a member of the Transportation and Implementation Task Group. So with that, I will turn the webinar over to Kevin. And again, if you have any questions, please just let us know.
Thank you, Alyssa. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So we are basically just going to go through a couple slides, and I think it's important to talk about, first and foremost, the City of Flint. The City of Flint, up until 2013, did not have a city master plan since 1960. So it was the first master planning process in 54 years. It was adopted last October in October of 2013, and it was developed through pretty broad community input and engagement. One thing we wanted to basically continue to focus on was engagement. So after the master plan was adopted, we had this great public participation, and as Alyssa said, we wanted to basically continue the momentum through the implementation. We didn't want the plan to, quote, sit on a shelf, as I think a lot of cities see with plans and studies, and I think a lot of flack, and rightfully so, from residents and community members of all this work going into this document, planning document, and then it not going anywhere. So the purpose of the task groups was to more or less coordinate and implement the strategies that were developed in the Imagine Flint Master Plan. There were over about probably 600 plus strategies that were developed in the planning process. And we wanted to basically ensure continued support and buy-in of the city's master plan through the implementation, and that meant that actual members and community members and residents would basically not only get involved, but then become advocates for master plan implementation. So the phrase we used a lot was to parlay plan content into actual action. So no more visioning, no more sitting around saying this is what we want. We basically said we already did that. Now how do we move forward and actually get people to actually implement things into action? So this is the process. We actually had an application process. We developed an application that was distributed through the press, was distributed through online, social media, through the newspaper, through our email list, and we had about 120 individuals apply. We did have some stipulations to ensure equity, and that's a big guiding principle of the city's master plan is social equity and diversity. So the groups had to be made up of 2/3 Flint residents, and they must also then represent geographic equity throughout the entire city. So the city has 9 wards, has 9 kind of distinct districts, governing legislative districts, and our intent was to basically create equity among those 9 within the groups. So ensuring that we do have equal representation from the entire city, that was kind of one of the main key elements of the application. So we actually then worked, our planning staff worked with our city planning commission, and we sat down and went through all 120 of these applications and actually placed 105 individuals. And I think it's important to note this is strictly a voluntary process. There's no money involved. You don't get paid, so the members, not only majority of them do work full-time, but they've been committed to basically participate their own time and volunteer their own time to implement this city master plan. So I think that's really unique about this process is that they are not encouraged through monetary means or through resources to get involved. It's more or less just them wanting to actually do something for the city of Flint and integrate kind of what they're doing in their daily life or what interests them into a planning process. So there are 7 groups in all. There are actually 12 chapters of the master plan, but 7 focus on actual content. These range from public safety, economic development, to parks and open space, to transportation and mobility. And that's going to kind of be what we talked about today. But there are 7 groups in all. And what basically happened throughout this process is the city of Flint, up until recently, we had just 2 planners on staff. We were recently able to hire a 3rd, but we really didn't have the capacity and the bandwidth to convene and facilitate all 7 of these working groups. So what we did is we tried to seek out group coordinators, as we called them, but basically they would work with city planning staff on convening, on logistics, on facilitation, but would also, were expected to kind of take the lead on getting materials out to group members, even doing meeting minutes, getting those out, ensuring participation at the monthly meetings, and kind of working and moving the group forward so the city staff wasn't burdened and could also do other things with master plan implementation outside of just these groups. So ultimately, we had 7 groups that were formed. They decided to meet monthly, so scheduling meetings like any working group, and kind of convened with both city staff and then I think the uniqueness of this actual community members. So both of them together. kind of worked on these groups. And then basically, you know, what the groups were tasked with is each chapter, so all 7 of these chapters, have hundreds of strategies to select. They each have one goal. So each chapter has one goal. So for instance, the transportation and mobility group, the overarching master plan ultimate goal, the ultimate vision was to design a city that has a sustainable, modern, and safe multimodal transportation network that efficiently provides for the needs of all people and business. So we took that goal, and then the function of the task group, and basically how we started the first meeting was we said to members, we want you to identify and form consensus on 1 to 3 strategies within this chapter, and that'll be your starting point to implement. Within the master plan, we divvy up these 100 strategies. We divide them into short-term, medium-term, and longer-term. And we did encourage and try to encourage the group members, the groups, to identify these strategies that they could maybe achieve over the next 12 months. We asked for a 12-month commitment for group members, and knowing that, and knowing, as you all know, how much work goes into just getting one thing done, we really wanted to try to pick, you know, some of the more achievable, obtainable strategies, and see if we can make some progress slowly but surely. So we did a couple initial exercises. One of the first things we did is we kind of did a mind mixer type exercise. And the idea of this was to generate a resource bank, seeing what's in the room between members. A lot of these members had never met before. Some of them actually worked together, but other ones had never met before. Some of them had never been involved in the master planning process before. So it was kind of a unique mix of individuals. So we wanted to figure out, okay, what's in the room, so that can help us, you know, decide and dictate and identify strategies that we feel like we'll be able to achieve. So we basically just figured out what our strengths, our weaknesses were, what our assets were, what we had, you know, what our potential resources were, what we had access to. So for instance, folks who had data collection or had access to data would list that, or folks that had access to writing grants or had experience doing such. These are the sort of things that were brought out during this process. And from there, we actually started with 100 and then kind of worked down into identifying these 1 to 3 within these groups of what would work best. And I think it would be important now to kind of go over and let Allie and Rob talk about, once we identify the strategies, as you can see on this slide here, then what the next step was and how the group then went to track their own progress, and I think kind of be accountable to themselves and keep themselves moving along.
This is Allie. Rob, I just wanted to ask if something, do you want to discuss Objective 2 first and the matrix you developed?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And basically, to go back to what Kevin had said, the way we selected the objectives was everybody was a champion for the ones they actually were assigned a task of coming up with the 3 objectives that they had that they felt the most strongly about, that fit in with the team's resources and aptitudes and abilities, and then defend those. So basically, we laid, like almost anything that's good, you need a structure for it. So we laid it out on a matrix, and basically we had a group discussion, and it worked very, very well. At the end of the one meeting, we basically selected the objectives that we were going to pursue. So Allie, that's...
So in addition to creating a matrix, we decided specifically for Objective 2 to a subcommittee from our full committee. Three of us really specialize in finding data for audits and have some background in conducting audits. So we referenced Safe Out to School audits, which is a federal program that looks at paths and pedestrian walkways and safety around school environments. And then we also looked at recently developed audits from the City of Lansing and maybe even like statewide audits to kind of pull questions and figure out what the best approach would be. And then we also discussed the input of data, what the best approach would be for that for city officials, as opposed to just sending them a report of handwritten notes. We wanted to know how can we extract data, how can we just create attributes so that they can input it into an application and simply form a report and figure out priorities from there. Rob, did you want to add to that?
No, very good. I think the key, though, in the team, and Allie mentioned this, was to have strong subcommittees, because we had a very diverse group of people, which is a great thing. But they're people that didn't necessarily, and some of them worked together, but a lot of them, as Kevin had mentioned, didn't even know each other. So basically, we had to come up with a method of giving some structure, some documentation, and actually have good subcommittees that would do the work between the monthly meetings, and then the monthly meetings had to be well structured also. And we put together documents such as RASICs, timelines, things like that, so we could actually track our activities and work on and determine the next steps and measure our progress. Okay, Ellie, go ahead.
So for the walkability audit, our next steps are to create volunteer groups to actually conduct walkability audits. So we're looking into that. We're trying to figure out the best methods of training individuals, the timing, et cetera. We're really excited because we work with the city to develop an app that is mobile friendly and helping provide, providing community members with a user-friendly mobile application to be able to gather all this data, I think will really, really help speed the process along. And it's a brand new sort of concept for a lot of people, so it's very exciting for us. And should I go ahead and move on to complete streets, or are we gonna? Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Rob, is there anything else you wanted to add to walkability?
The only thing about the walkability audit is we want to do this, and they're going to be a series of events, but we actually want to turn this into a process that becomes that lives well beyond our functioning as a team. And our ultimate goal is to turn this into something the citizens own, and it becomes, say, an application on their smartphone. So as they see things that they would like to have fixed or things they would like, they can actually collect this information themselves, send it to the database at the city, and it gets put in with their list of priorities, things they might need money for, etc. So that's it, Allie, for me.
And I think it's from a city perspective, I don't think anyone knew where these groups were going to go, and there were meetings held beyond not just this group but the other 6, where we were kind of, I guess, spinning our wheels. What's really unique and why we wanted to highlight this group in particular is actually from the work that's been generated and created from this group. The city has actually invested in the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Development at the City of Flint has basically has invested in technology. And Flint is, I know some of you may think this is a no-brainer, but Flint is a bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to adapting to technology. So this is actually a big kind of an encouragement from our end to see this, but they've actually invested in this sort of capital and this technology, and a lot of it was driven by the group. And I think now they're actually, and other department heads are actually looking at ways and are interested to see how this process is going to work, this data collection process using tablets and using residents can actually work moving forward. Because when you're a city like Flint and you have very limited staffing capacity and staffing numbers, you really have to get innovative in how you can actually improve services and improve the quality of life for residents. So I think this is a good example of a type of partnership that wouldn't have existed prior to the city's master plan, kind of this resident interaction with department heads and with departments throughout the city. And, you know, we talked about that early on as what we wanted to see happen, but I don't think any of us knew how that would happen. So that this kind of came up holistically and naturally, and it's been really interesting to watch.
So the next objective was developing and adopting a complete streets ordinance. So the City of Flint adopted a resolution, a complete streets resolution some time ago that basically states that they're working towards developing a policy and kind of abiding by the guidelines that promote maintain an efficient network of roads and streets. So as a group, we decided having a policy was a strong or really powerful force to drive these transportation initiatives. Basically, everything else that was listed in that very long list of tasks and feedback that the city received from all of its residents regarding transportation and what they would like to see. So I worked with a couple of members, again, in the group, and I referenced many, many complete streets policies statewide throughout Michigan. Saline, Lansing, Ann Arbor, there's so many places that had complete streets policies or resolutions. I even referenced some out of state, just for the sake of like a broader language, to be able to ensure that the City of Flint complete streets policy draft was very broad. It was good at ensuring we had a pretty strong language to back up the mission of the policy. So I've been presenting the drafts at every single meeting to all of the transportation members. We review it as a team. We provide feedback to one another. And once we reached a point where we felt like it was pretty good, we sought advice and guidance from city officials such as Kevin, and he was able to provide even more guidance as to how we could really develop language to ensure that Planning Commission and Transportation Department would back this up. So at this point, we are just about done with having the final draft that we will be presenting to city members.
Yeah, this is another good, I think, to my point a minute ago. The city is currently rewriting our entire zoning code, which has not been touched since 1974. Within that, now we obviously are looking to other ordinances to complement the code. So this complete streets ordinance will be a nice, kind of a nice reference point, and it'll be part of this kind of broader zoning code update, which will make it a lot easier to get through the legislative process to adopt this, because we'll have the zoning code going up for adoption. So again, we didn't foresee that, I think, early on, and it kind of just worked out really, really nicely. And it's also something that the city has, as Allie mentioned, adopted a resolution to create years back, but really never worked on creating a comprehensive policy. So now we've got the group and community members kind of leading that charge. So I think what you know, the groups did have worked really well. We thought it would be interesting for those of you listening and watching to just identify and mention some of the challenges and some of the lessons learned. I think from a city perspective, part of some of the biggest challenges, and you know, this is one of the groups that has probably operated the most successfully and the smoothest, but the biggest thing with some of the other groups is kind of keeping people on task and realizing that, you know, this is actually implementing things, it's not visioning. I think a lot of times in our communities we like to talk about what should be and what we want to see, but when it actually comes down to doing it, you know, that's when you really have to take the next step and push forward. I think the other thing, and definitely this is unique not only to Flint but to other communities, is the funding. And there are some great projects obviously listed in a lot of cities' master plans, and they have huge dollar amounts. Even some of the smaller projects have these larger dollar amounts. And with this group, it's, you know, they've really focused on trying to identify volunteers and using technical support from the city and the county government to get feedback on things. But with some of the other groups, you know, strategies where the price tag looks like it may be large and not really having a lot of certainty about the potential budget and the funds available to actually implement these projects. The other challenge, I think, primarily with this group as it relates to Flint in Michigan and the Midwest, is basically, you know, for 6 to 8 months out of the year, it's very difficult to get outside and actually complete a walking audit. Especially in our case in Flint, with the lack of the city services not being as adequate as they should be, it's difficult for sometimes to get out there and actually walk. So we do have a much shortened window of when we can actually work to implement these. And I don't know if Rob, if you had any other thoughts on some challenges the group faced.
Once again, I think the key to this really was the fact that you've taken people from different backgrounds and that have other time pressures on them and build a team. And I think, once again, the key to that is you have to have good meetings that are productive, that people feel they're worthwhile to come to and they're going to, frankly, enjoy. So we did a number of things, such as team building activities, where we, you know, got to know each other. They were kind of the games a little game that you might play just as thought starters. We also did things, once again, I'd mentioned things such as we created a structure, and good structure requires good documentation. So we were tracking what our subcommittees were doing, and we could track that in between the monthly meetings. And once again, that includes things such as timelines. We simplified, like, you know, you can use critical path or Gantt charts. We kind of simplified that. So we do, as a team, keep a timeline. We do have kind of an informal RASIC, which is just a documentation that we use to track responsibility and how things are going. And really that's the key to keeping the thing moving right along. And of course you have to have an end date that actually drives the whole timeline. And that's about it.
Thanks, Rob.
Sure.
And so with that, obviously we did touch on, I think, a decent amount of successes, but I think it'd be important to note even more. What you see here is this actually tool that was developed by group members and actually developed by the Planning and Development Department at the city. But this is kind of a tablet-based Esri ArcGIS online-based software mechanism that came out of this group. Basically, they are developing a walkability sidewalk audit tool that has been thoroughly vetted by multiple departments at the city, and feedback has then came back to the group. So I think, again, this kind of coordination of residents and community members with your city staff, you know, I think that really helps with transparency and accountability, and that's one of the things in the city's master plan that we really focus on and we call out as important. Also, I think another huge success has been a little bit more of regional collaboration. You know, I would definitely, without even any sort of direction from the city, I think it was interesting. The group went out and solicited input from county planning staff. And historically in the state of Michigan and in Flint, kind of this regional collaboration with cities and counties is not always that strong. So actually kind of integrating both the city and county planning support into the Complete Streets Ordinance, you know, I think that actually is really unique, and it's a success story that came out of this. And then with that same objective, again, like I mentioned, our hope is, and we're not there yet, but our hope is that this can be seamlessly integrated into the city zoning code update So we'll have this ordinance in place, and it's just another strategy we can check off, and I think it's just another outstanding project that we can say we completed. And if you don't have anything else on successes, we've got one last slide on next steps.
Actually, the only thing I did want to say to kind of further what you had mentioned, Kevin, to broaden the support base for this and the resource base, is when we do our sidewalk audit, for example, we do plan on enlisting as much of the citizenry as we can. Volunteer groups to conduct the surveys. We're going to work with neighborhood groups, church groups, the bike clubs, and the trail groups are going to actually help us in our initial surveys. So once again, when you do that, of course, the advantage is you learn a lot more because these are the people that use these resources, the sidewalks and things like that. And then also you get more of a buy-in because they have an ownership. They're stakeholders. And the good results are important to them. You know, they're part of the team. That's it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rob. And then last but not least, kind of where we're at, and I think Al kind of touched on some of that. The group members did initially commit to a 12-month timeline. So where the city's at is kind of figuring out what the next step is for the groups. And this is kind of a larger part of our engagement public participation plan. As Alyssa kind of mentioned at the beginning, we had a lot of engagement and used actually some tools that we learned from the German Marshall Fund and the Dialogues for Change exchange. But now it's kind of at that next step of, okay, we've got a plan in place. Now what is the city's public participation plan? So I think we're going to actually use some lessons learned from these groups and figure out, you know, how we can continue to remain accountable and transparent. With this group, as Rob mentioned, the group is beginning to, I think they've scheduled a test run, or they're about to schedule actually a test run using this software that was developed and using kind of the smartphone and the live data collection. So they're in the process of actually going to be going out and testing all this work over the last 9-10 months, and kind of learning from their own mistakes and learning from their own lessons and how they can strengthen that. And then they're going to begin to kind of recruit and train community volunteers. The beauty of this, also integrating kind of these key stakeholders in the community, such as Allie, is these organizations that are very well respected and trusted in Flint. It's very easy to recruit and encourage folks to participate. So that's another thing when we formed the groups we did look for, was kind of these organizations that were active and staff members who applied. We definitely see that as a plus. And I think that's unique to get that kind of buy-in from different organizations who may have different, in some instances, competing agendas, but kind of coming together to get things done. And then ultimately, with the last piece, as we mentioned, presenting this to the Planning Commission, there's a few groups who actually are going to be physically presenting things to the city's Planning Commission. It is our hope that we continue to engage more folks in planning processes and in implementation, and we feel a big first step in doing so is getting them in the face of the planning commissioners, especially if they live in the city, getting them to interact with them. So these are things that not only for this group but for the other 6 groups, they're engaging with the mayor in a couple initiatives of the City of Flint. They're engaging with the local Chamber of Commerce, some of the major hospitals in Flint. So each group is engaging with different stakeholders throughout the community, and I do really think that's unique to highlight because I don't think every organization throughout cities are always willing to do that. And I don't know if Rob, if you have any kind of last thoughts before we kind of take some questions.
I think you summed it up very well, Kevin. Democracy sometimes can be a slower way sometimes to get things started, but But when you do engage the stakeholders, the actual users, it's so much more satisfying at the end. The results are much longer lasting. And once again, just better for the community as a whole.
So Kevin, Rob, and Ali, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. You know, Kevin, you made a really good point in the beginning when you addressed basically this planning fatigue that people experience. So really making a point to move from planning into actual implementation is really exciting, and it's very exciting to see community members who are so engaged and interested in implementing the plan. So many times people in communities, like I said, have this fatigue of planning, nothing ever gets done, but it's really exciting to see this innovation come about. So we do have some questions from folks who are on the webinar. Kevin, this one is just a quick question about the time horizon for the master plan. Can you give us an idea of what that would be?
The kind of the next steps, or?
I think they're just wondering, like, is it a plan from like 2015 to 2030 or like 2015 to 2020?
Well, it was adopted in 2013, so it's actually it's a 20-year vision. But state law in Michigan basically, I should say, doesn't require, but it asks you to update every 5 years. So it is the expectation that cities in Michigan update their master plan every 5 years. But I can't tell you the vision for the document and some of the goals. It's a 20-year kind of blueprint.
Great. This next question is something that maybe Robin, you can both address. This person wants to know who chaired the groups. So I think it might be interesting if you could talk about the relationship between Rob, who was the chair of the task group, and Kevin, you, I guess, sort of oversaw the task groups. So could you maybe reference the relationship that you had and who was really like leading this process?
Actually, Kevin, I'll start. You jump in. Basically, it really did start with Kevin's group and a lady we had named Christian Stevenson, and she helped organize the group, and she actually helped us through the process of selecting the objectives that we were going to pursue. And really, with me, I kind of evolved into the role of coordinator in that I had a background. I used to launch. I'm retired now, but I used to launch trucks for General Motors. Truck programs. We launched them in seven assembly plants throughout North America, and then we also did a lot of international work. So it was, once again, when we did our analysis of the resources in the team and the strengths and the aptitudes that we had, I had a career in program management. So it really just kind of evolved into it. And to tell you the truth, I went into it, started doing minutes. Then I started creating matrices and things like that for the team. And once again, it was kind of a rewarding experience. It turned out to be a lot of fun. And the thing you're dealing with in the team is people that, and I've used the word before, passion. They're there because they want to be there. They're not there. They're not being paid, as Kevin had mentioned. So it's very interesting to work with all these people, you know, to basically harness all of these different skills, aptitudes, and things like that to come up with one whole product at the end. That's it for me.
It was so the initial process when staff sat down with the Planning Commission to select the members and ensure their diversity and kind of equal representation was to then actually tentatively find individuals from those groups that we knew, that either the Planning Commission or the staff knew, who had really been involved in the planning process over the prior 3 years, and kind of pencil them in as these group coordinators, knowing that the city didn't. And you know, it's different if the city leads it versus if residents and community members actually see one of their own lead it. So we initially kind of identified some of these members, and then reached out to them and basically asked them. I would say half of them actually said they couldn't due to time constraints, and they just wanted to be, or they wanted to be a member, and in the past they had facilitated a lot, and they kind of wanted to have more input, not from a facilitation role. So I think it was a combination of that and kind of what Rob mentioned, and then some just kind of rose and basically said that they would take it upon themselves to kind of lead the groups. And I will say, I think it's important to note, though, not every group was, there was someone like Rob or Allie to kind of take the lead. And as Rob mentioned, we're fortunate enough to have some AmeriCorps support here at the city. And one of our best members kind of helped me out in this process. And her and I, in some instances, did do a lot of the convening and facilitation ourselves. So I do think it's important to really identify and really push the group to identify that leader who can actually move the group forward.
Thanks, Kevin. Related to what you were just talking about regarding resources and support, did the city provide any sort of support to these groups in terms of training or admin support or logistics, like providing rooms or even financial support?
Again, I think it's all relative to the group. So yes to all of those. This group is unique where they kind of found a common meeting place, and it was actually at the Disability Network, which I think is fitting because the chapter is transportation and mobility, and they're talking about increasing the mobility for all Flint residents throughout the city. Other groups actually do meet at our office at City Hall. We have a couple groups who meet at our office at City Hall. We actually open the building up to one of the groups, and we meet from 6 to 8 at night on Thursdays. So they actually meet after business hours at City Hall. We are more than willing, when asked and when needed, to do any sort of printing and to actually do email reminders. And then I think, again, the kind of technical support, technical assistance just came out. This group is a good example of that, working with the Department of Transportation, or the Director of Transportation, working with our GIS technician. Kind of getting that technical feedback and technical insight has helped strengthen their work. And with some of the other groups, actually, one of the other groups is actually looking at a low maintenance, low cost green infrastructure project on a vacant lot. And in this instance, they're actually building a budget, and we are actually, and it's minimal funds. Obviously, Flint is strapped financially, but we are actually looking at ways internally how we can provide the funds, and we're talking, mulch, and we're talking dirt, stuff like that to help the group actually implement the strategy. So I think it is a combination of all of it. It's not a huge pot, but I think depending on what comes out of this, we do have some ideas of maybe we can set aside some money each year if residents and community members are willing to do these projects. That's, I think that's the city's role to then reward the groups and actually see these projects through.
And then furthermore, I think we realized early on, even if we didn't have the money to do all of the things that we discovered in our study, if nothing else, we might even stick around and help write grants and things like that. At least we've given some raw material for grants. And then furthermore, even if we don't accomplish everything that we discover in our audit, even if you do it 25% now, 25% later, hey, it's like a home run versus, hey, it's still a score on the baseball scoreboard, whether you had to hit yourself in or you had a home run. So we're kind of broad-minded on that approach.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rob, that it's not an all or nothing approach.
Right. And whenever we did hear that would sometimes come up in the meeting. Well, we're not going to have the resource. We'd say, hey, look, and even your counterpart, Allie, Teresa, said, hey, you go for what you can, and you just keep chinking away. You keep just chinking away at it. And once again, if nothing else, we can help write grants and be champions for those grants later on down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've mentioned this resource bank idea a couple of times, so we have a question that's asking about if there was any particular approach to identify and fill the gaps when you did this resource bank or this audit. So if you identified...
Identified resources in the team, you mean?
Yeah, so if once you conducted the audit and you realized maybe you don't have anyone on the team who can use GIS and you need to do that, like did you have an approach to solving that issue?
Basically, we've so far it's worked out pretty well that and I guess I got to give Kevin and his folks credit. The team's pretty well rounded. We're pretty comfortable in that we can accomplish the things that we have to, and the city did provide very good support for us in terms of the information management, the data management. So that has not been, interestingly enough, that has not been a stumbling block for our team.
And with such a diverse group, a lot of the group members are wonderful at networking. They know a lot of other individuals, in addition to city officials, that could really help steer the walkability audit or steer the complete streets policy. So ensuring that there's effective communication between everybody, and there's like lines of communication, like if we needed resources or if we needed tools, guidance, that sort of thing. Everyone was just able and willing to help.
Yeah, and I would just say, Alyssa, and I think it's important, the formation of the groups is important too, because in the application process, it's not like we were starting these from new. A lot of these, the 120 or so individuals who applied, I would say over probably 3/4 of them had been involved in one way or the other in some capacity over the previous 3 years during the master planning process. So I think we had a good idea of what their own skill set was and what they kind of brought to the table. And then additionally on that application, you're actually asked to put what some of your skills are. In addition to if you do work, like so for instance, Allie works at a local, the Crim Fitness Foundation, which does a ton of different things. So we kind of can then, I guess, brainstorm, well, we think, Allie has the ability to attract volunteers, but also knows a lot about active living. Okay, maybe it makes sense to place her. Her choice may have been number 2. We asked them to rank their choices for groups. So transportation and mobility may have been her second choice, but knowing her background and that she could be a valuable member, we then placed her in this group and basically asked her if she still wanted to participate. So the application of kind of listing what you could bring to the table, what affiliations you had, and kind of what your choices were, to give us up to 3 choices of where you wanted to be placed, I think kind of helps that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really a team effort between the city and the group members in filling any gaps that there may have been. Kevin, you just mentioned also that out of the people that applied to participate in these groups, a majority of them were somehow previously involved with the plan. So one of our network members from the UK mentioned that if they were looking for volunteers in the UK, they would probably attract people that they already knew. So they're wondering if the experience that you had was that you got, like you mentioned, a majority of people who were already involved, and what kind of balance there was between new and existing participants?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and we get that, and I'm sure everyone on the call gets that as well. It's the same people. I think what's interesting, and we didn't really talk historically about the participation process with the city's master plan, but we actually did something similar, and we created advisory groups early on around around 6 topics when we were developing the plan, which these were more just kind of vision groups. What do you want to see and why? And they actually helped write the strategies. So we had these groups of this group of individuals, but I will admit we didn't go to extraordinary lengths to solicit new participation. I think what we've seen throughout the course of the last 3.5 years is, you know, we get new people involved at different times, whereas some people drop off that have been involved. I can't tell you what we did do when we went through the applications was to place anyone who we had no record of being involved on a group. So we did ensure that, but other than the recruitment, we didn't do anything special. I guess, not to put Rob on the spot, but it may be interesting to hear from Rob's point of view, because I know Allie was tremendously involved in the planning process, but I don't think Rob was as much, and maybe what drew him to the group.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I obviously don't have any statistics on how many people were newbies or weren't, but speaking for myself, I was just a blind rookie who had an interest in alternative forms of transportation and the City of Flint, obviously, and things like that. And Kevin, I saw an article in the Flint Journal, the local newspaper, and I basically went to one of your visioning sessions that you actually chaired. That's where I met you for the Grand Traverse Greenway. And somebody handed me an application. I'd been looking for an opportunity to participate in some public service things, filled it out, and there I was. So if you were looking for some kind of a mix, you did at least get one, like I said, totally cold, blind rookie in me.
I did not know that, so that I guess I definitely got something else.
So it sounds like you really wanted a coalition of the willing to be part of this activity.
Yeah, and I think what we've, unfortunately, and just on that point, Alyssa, is we have seen some numbers drop off from the first people that got placed, and I think we all see that in processes that take a while. You know, the commitment isn't always there, and or the time isn't always there. But I do think part of it may even be that kind of willing body who's actually willing to take the next step to actually implement things as opposed to just vision things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what we tried to stress, and I'm sure some people got upset with Kristen and myself and our staff, because we did try to stress repeatedly that this isn't visioning, you know, we need to take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at some point, you have to take that step, otherwise the plan's not going to go anywhere. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, so I have a couple here. One is asking about local politicians. So how do the local politicians view this process, and has there been any tension between these task groups and the elected officials?
I mean, I could just speak from what I hear and what I'm told. We talk regularly with our elected officials. We have kind of update meetings with multiple city council members. I can just tell you, I know there's an election in November, and I've heard 3 out of the 4 of the politicians mention these working groups as a positive in their campaign spiels and their speeches. So I think that's encouraging. With one of the groups, we're actually sitting down, the group is sitting down with the mayor here coming up to talk about one of the initiatives that actually deals with kind of some of the administration office at the mayor's office. So I think for the most part, I mean, I think the politicians appreciate the continued engagement and participation of residents and avenues for residents to get involved. And this is just one of many things we try to do. But I think we've gotten a positive response from them, even though they all maybe don't agree with every element of the city's master plan. I think they value and appreciate the kind of participation.
Mm-hmm. And Allie or Rob, any inside baseball that Kevin might not know about that you all might have be able to share?
In terms of relationships with the city, to be honest with you, Kevin and his people, we sat down early and we decided we're the folks that actually do the shovel work. We're the tactical people. They're the strategic folks. And if we had to have any issues with the city, Kevin, you and Kristen have handled them very, very well, because it's been pretty smooth sailing for us so far.
Right. I'm going to piggyback on Rob's statement. I completely agree with him. I think, as Kevin mentioned earlier, transparency is key. And I'd say that the city has done an excellent job of maintaining transparency between group members and themselves, and being available to members with questions that are, that completely relate to these objectives, and just being there pretty much, I'd say within a day or two tops, getting back to us, giving us guidance so we can continuously move forward. It's just been a wonderful experience.
Amen.
Great, thank you. So maybe one last quick question. Actually, it might not be quick, but maybe you can just give quick answers. And you've touched on this a little bit, but how do you get people or keep people engaged in this, and how do you get them to realize that these things, what may seem very minor in some instances, how do you get them to see these things as really being important and making a difference to the city? Do people feel like put upon by the city, like the city's not doing its job, or are they really excited to take on these projects because they do want to see change in the city? Maybe you can each quickly just address that issue.
I'd say that, I haven't been a City of Flint resident for too long, but from what I could tell from residents, they were tired. I mean, a lot of people were just very upset that the master plan had been 54 years since it had been updated. But once the planning process began, and once the adoption took place, you can kind of sense a lot of excitement with residents. And with the city providing visioning opportunities, I think that was extremely successful. Just getting residents to provide answers and guidance on what they wanted to see. Again, just kind of giving them that sense of buy-in, that sense of pride in their community, and which would drive anyone to want to be involved, hopefully. And in this case, I think that it's definitely worked. So I'd say that initially, sure, there might have been tension, but with these opportunities having been provided, you're starting to see a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz around the master plan and around these groups, and a lot of these transportation chapter group members too are really excited. And then within the group too, keeping everyone engaged constantly, like Rob said, like even doing games, just kind of getting everyone involved, kind of putting their guard down a little bit, just kind of trusting each other to get the work done. And then obviously assigning a task to everyone, just getting them, maintaining that engagement, maintaining their interest, maintaining that buy-in has been a wonderful process.
I have to agree with everything Ali said, and just to kind of amplify it a little bit, if you involve the stakeholders, and what she referenced, if you involve the stakeholders early on and you make it their plan, when you execute it, you get so much more support. It's the beauty of democracy. It takes a little longer to do the beginning work, the shoveling. You're shoveling a whole lot of ore, then you hit a gold nugget, and then the thing starts to feed on itself. It takes on its own life, and it kind of moves along. Don't get me wrong, you have to push it quite a bit, but still, it's a wonderful thing to watch. It's kind of exciting and fun.
Kevin, any last words from your side?
Yeah, I think the level of participation in Flint, given the, and I'm not sure how many of the callers know of the history of Flint and where Flint is now and where it once was, but to see the level of resident and community participation, I think, is unique, and I think it's really a story that nationally and even locally they fail to see sometimes. So I think that's a positive, and I think that's easier for our staff to continue to work when we do have support, even though we have very few staff members. But also, I think these groups. I don't think we should kid ourselves. They are not the answer to every issue and ill in the city. But I think if you can begin to build trust, even within one department, hopefully that then carries over to other departments, be it police and fire, be it the public works department and the infrastructure issues and the mayor's office, whatever it may be. So I think it can be a tool that hopefully can spread a little bit more trust among residents. And again, I think it's a good tool that in this instance, we weren't really sure how it would turn out. And all along, I think some people were wondering, well, what's your process going to be? How is it going to turn out? And we really couldn't answer that because I think it's more of a holistic process and it's organic. So, I think that's why we wanted to highlight this group in particular, because it's really been unique. And I think it's actually a tool that other cities could learn from and use themselves to actually get some things done and keep that trust with residents.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, we've already had some feedback from one of our participants that they really enjoyed learning about these task groups, and they think that it might be a great tool for them to use in their own work. So I want to thank all three of you, Kevin, Ali, and Rob, for taking time out of your day to present this webinar. And obviously, we wish you continued success in your work, and we will be closely following any developments, and we hope that you'll also keep us updated. So with that, I think we will conclude the webinar. Again, this has been recorded, so if there's anything you'd like to listen to afterwards, definitely feel free to visit our website. So thank you again to our friends in the City of Flint, and we will be in touch with everyone again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.